And what you have to realize very quickly as a leader is that your clients are no longer your clients anymore. Your clients are actually your advisors. How can you help them develop? How can you make them better?
Jay, great to have you here on the Seven Figure Advisor podcast. I only met you recently, but I really enjoyed the story that you shared with me, putting your firm together over the last couple of years. And what jumped out a lot was how you said that how you think about your firm and how you're building it. Would you share your concept around that? Because I think it's just so powerful.
Yeah. So again, I spent a little bit of time. I spent about 13 years of my career as a regional director for Prudential in a leadership capacity. So I spent 13 years of focusing on building and growing an organization. And one of the key factors of building an organization is having the right culture. I think Peter Drucker says it best: culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that was a big focus of mine when I was in leadership. And so as I stepped out of that leadership role and officially in 2023 to partner with my business partner today and build our practice together and grow and expand, I said, we need to have the right culture, vision to build where we're trying to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also really enjoy what you said about diving all in.
Yeah, I remember telling that to you. Again, it was definitely a burn the boats moment. I heard that from Tony Robbins a while ago, is if you want something to happen, you got to burn the boats and fully commit. And so I was walking away from a significantly high six-figure income, almost seven figures at one point. That was pretty much guaranteed to me based on my leadership capacity. And I had to go to my wife and tell her that, hey, I was going to take a leap of faith and go and build a practice with another business partner and step out of my role. And now my wife had grown accustomed to living a certain lifestyle with three kids. So she was arguably nervous, but she said, I got your back. Let's do this. And supported me because of what I was at the time. It was just a lot of changes within our firm, some good, some a little bit more difficult. But I kept on seeing my income slightly decrease and my stress level slightly increase. So I wanted to have a little bit more control over my life. And that's why I went back into running a practice.
It's really clear to me that like the situation started to change a little bit from where you were, right? And so there's some moving around, right? There's some prodding about seeing like, okay, what are you willing to do? But for me, what jumped out from your story is that how you really lent and burned the boats, as you said, the upside, the opportunity, building the firm. What was that story you were telling yourself? What was that vision you were going towards? Because that has to be big to walk away.
Well, it was definitely, I would say, scary, because I said to myself, how do I replace, initially from a cash flow perspective, I was like, how do I replace this income as quickly as possible that I was guaranteed to get over the next year? So that was a scary part for me. Again, it goes back to something that I was taught when I was a little kid. My parents always said two phrases for me. And the first one was hard work pays off. And the other is be a leader, not a follower. And so what I realized in that moment was, number one, I knew if I put in the right effort, I would get the results that I was looking for. And those results, they had to be high enough to live the same lifestyle that we were living and providing for my family. The second quote comes to me, be a leader, not a follower, because I had to do something that not every other regional director was doing, which is really, I don't think the regional director role for me was a career position. It was either you were climbing the corporate ladder or you were eventually go back into personal practice. And so for me, it was a control factor. I wanted more control over my life. I wanted unlimited income potential. Primarily, the big thing is I'm a control freak, and I wanted to have more control over my life from a work-life balance standpoint. And then ultimately building something as a regional director for 13 years, I had influence over approximately, at the time when I left, I think it was 53 advisors that fell under my kind of scope of leadership. But I had a hand in influencing some of their practice growth, but I had zero equity in that and the growth of their practices, which for me, I was like, if I was a business owner, this is a terrible business model. I'm helping them grow businesses and I don't have anything to show for it at the end of the day. And so that was another factor is that, hey, I want to have the capability, not that I would, but I want to have the ability to sell my practice down the road.
So it's looking at the bigger picture, doubling down on the bet on yourself. It's work hard. You know that you're going to work hard. It's a prerequisite, and lead, don't follow. I think that's pretty damn awesome. Tell me a bit more about that working hard piece, Jay, because I find it very intriguing to look at certain barriers that advisors get to and double down on working harder. Now, I think work hard is a good advice. So I'd love your thoughts on this. I think work hard is absolutely great advice. I think a lot of successful people get that advice, but I think it runs out in a certain way because the paradigm is work hard versus don't work hard, and definitely take work hard up to a point. Then it becomes the paradigm actually switches. And I think it's work hard versus create leverage, because that work hard is a kind of prerequisite at a certain point. So I love your thoughts on that. How have you seen that for you?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I noticed, again, working hard, obviously really important. I think you have to have that as a backbone for your successes, but there's something to be said for working smart with your practice. And so for me, I think it was, I wanted to put my effort in the areas that I was the best at. So again, I should not be, for lack of a better term, wasting my time in areas that I was subpar, because it ruined, I would say it slowed our growth. That if I was wearing too many hats. So the areas that I believe I'm good at, and you'd have to ask my business partner if I'm good at them, but is on the marketing side of our business. How do we grow this? And then I still play a major leadership role within our practice. So again, it's keeping us all on course, working with our junior advisors to make sure that they're developing in a quick fashion. So what I wanted to focus on was the areas that I was really strong at. And then thankfully, the areas that my business partner was really strong at were essentially the opposite of what I was doing. So it helped out our success significantly. What I also realized, and I think you may have already read this book, but The Science of Scaling is a phenomenal book. And the biggest thing that we took away from that book so far was, what I noticed is that when I think of really big, hairy, audacious goals, the thing that scares me about them is that I have to take a different approach with that goal than I would as if I was just trying to make a linear growth of like 15%. But what if I want to grow by 70%? Well, if I want to grow by 70%, I have to think very differently on how I approach that goal.
So cool stuff to say about that. Yeah, that's a fantastic book. And there's so many great concepts in there. But yeah, it's very hard to see that exponential version of yourself if you're looking at what was and what could be. Science of Scaling, fantastic book. And you talked about they're not that linear growth, which is so attractive. It's so attractive to look forward. In fact, I would say there's so many things that are patterns in coaching and advising and consulting and the work that I do with advisors. But probably the number one thing that I see the most is a question of, hey, coach, with all these opportunities I've now got in front of me, which one should I take? And so you can figure out like what makes sense. But I believe really it's not the right question. The right question is, where's the relative endpoint? And then look back from that. And then it becomes much more clear around what one to take. But that on a practical day-by-day basis, that's so challenging to do because we're in that front spot. And so I think that's a fantastic distinction. And I'm excited to dive more into that later down the line. Tell me more about that leadership, because it sounds like what you took from the regional role that you had and took that back to starting a firm and basically started doing the same thing. I'm great at leadership, I'm great at marketing. I'm going to just do that. Morgan, you can do the other pieces that you like more of, and I'll lay into that spot.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm in client meetings with Morgan and so forth. I still run a practice, but I realized very quickly, like, for us to scale our business, there had to be someone kind of at the helm leading that. And I think the way you can scale a lot better is that you got to build other leaders. Yeah. And that's at the end of the day, what we do for financial planning purposes, that's what we do. We lead people. We're helping other leaders make smart decisions around their financial choices. So not really much of a difference. It's just that it's just in a different capacity. So now it's leading our little firm that we have now.
If you would break that down, because I think that principle exists all the time, right? Because it's the scaling piece. And if no one is at the helm, as you put it, to do that, then it doesn't get done.
Yeah.
So the size of your firm, you set up specifically to do that. What if you're an advisor that wasn't in a leadership role before? What if you're year 5, year 10, year 12, 15, that you haven't got to that point yet? Maybe you've got a couple of assistants. Maybe there's some sort of team there.
Yeah.
How does it look at different stages? Because I think it's still true.
Yeah.
But here's that, for me, I always see the same concept, same patterns, but application is different depending on the size and what you want.
Yeah. I think the thing for me was like the biggest shift in my career was the fact that I took a leadership role in 2009. I started in the industry in 2005-ish, 4-ish, dating myself now. And then 2009, I stepped into a leadership role, which was a totally new experience. Before it was all about me.
Right.
I'm the solo advisor. It's all about me. All I have to do is worry about my own problems. And then you move into a leadership role, you start growing your team. And what you have to realize very quickly as a leader is that your clients are no longer your clients anymore. Your clients are actually your advisors. How can you help them develop? How can you make them better? And throughout those 13 years in leadership, I realized there are some practices that I want to emulate, and there are certainly some practices that I don't want to emulate. And I saw the trials and tribulations that most advisors face. And a lot of it had to do with majority of them had a ton of self-limiting beliefs. Just like they couldn't do this, they couldn't do that. And it's not that they couldn't, it's just they didn't know how or what's the best way to address it. I know this is kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but I think that I need to start there first. And that was probably the biggest shift in my life. But what I would be making as a recommendation to any advisor that's 5 years and less and haven't had any leadership exposure is that one is you definitely have. It's with your clients. So you're leading them to make smart financial decisions. Now you just have to take that and emulate it from a CEO mindset, not financial advisor mindset. I feel like there are so many really talented financial advisors in our industry. However, there are a lot of very poor business owners in our industry. And those are two different hats. When you're in financial advisor mode and you're working with your clients, it's all about developing the right strategies for your client. As a business owner, it's about developing the right strategies for your.
I say that often. Great talented financial advisors, not necessarily the same from a business perspective. And if you're really careful about what you want, and so for me, all roads lead back to when working with advisors, what are you trying to accomplish here in a relative term, and dialing into that a bit more? Yeah, it's so powerful. Right. What would you say on a day-to-day basis? We go a bit more granular if we may, Jay. How do you work through that on a day-to-day? What do you think is the most important thing on a day-to-day basis, maybe even week to week, that you do as a leader, firstly through yourself, but then for the team, that is a tactical piece that perhaps people can pick up from this?
So I have my iPad here, and every night or every evening before I leave the office, I build out a to-do list of, it's usually a big list of things. And my goal with about half of that list is to give that to my client relationship manager, to give as much off my plate so that I can focus on the top 3 priorities for that week. Whether that right now, I'm working on our own next podcast. I'm working on our newsletter for September. So there's certain things that's going to need a lot of white space in the calendar to get completed. But I want to make sure that I get the things that everyone else can't do to me. And then everything that they can do, I get it to them as quickly as possible. So that's probably the first thing that I do every morning. And I say, all right, I should not be touching any of these things. And that's the first usually email I send out to either Justin or Elia. And they're like, hey, we need to get this done.
Love it. So my next question, which is, I guess you started to answer with some of that, is like, how do you protect your time? So I guess that's some of it, right? You're handing off the stuff saying, please do that. Here's my 3 as well. What other practices do you have to protect your time?
Yeah. So I think there needs to be, as one of my mentors is managing director of our firm. He always talked about it as you start to have more success in this career, whether it's in leadership or building a practice, you start to create more problems for yourself. The more success you have, the more problems you create for yourself, that your bandwidth starts to deteriorate. And he said, I remember he came in, it was before COVID. He came into my office and he happened to look at my calendar and he's like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, your calendar is unbelievable. He's like, you have so many meetings. You have zero time to even take a bathroom break, let alone like, he's like, where is your downtime during the week where you can be strategic and not reactive? And so I started building that into my model. So my Mondays are typically heavy admin and review days where we're setting up for the week. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are really client interface. We're meeting with clients, new prospects. Fridays is more of a recap, maybe one or two meetings with clients. And then Friday afternoon is primarily strategic planning. And what I'm looking at is not next week. I'm looking at the next month. Like, what are things can I get off our plate, or what are things that I need to get established so that I can be ahead of the curve?
Oh,
Putting out fires before they get there.
yeah. Oh, no, it's so important, isn't it? Because we talked about earlier around giving yourself a place where you can working hard doesn't work anymore or it runs out, right? And so you are looking at a calendar or someone's looking at a calendar and saying, oh, wow, there's so much stuff in there, Jay. Where's your strategic time? It's like, in order to get more, you've got to work less hard in some ways, right? But, I could push more, fit more in. Come back down to that. You know, the way I always think about this, a few years ago at our little beach house, my wife bought one of those little paddling pools for her kids. The girls are pretty young. And I was out there with a hose, just filling it up. And it's pretty, but it's like an 8-foot long thing. And I was just filling it up. And it had that little thing on the side that says max fill line because of this displacement and stuff. And I was just looking at that thinking, like, I could probably fit like 70, maybe even 60%, 30, maybe even 40% more water in that thing. And it's just like, and I just really use that as a way of thinking about my day, right? If I feel like I could fit more in, I don't want to go above like 60% of what I actually think is capacity, because as a leader, you've got to have that space to be able to look at actually what you're doing, because as soon as you get in it, it's like being a cloud. You don't know, like it's hard to see. You just can't see the roof of trees.
Well, there's one of my favorite leadership books is Extreme Ownership, and written by Jocko and Leif. And I'm a big follower of Jocko, but he talks about in that book why most SEAL teams there's only about 5 to 6 of them in a SEAL team, depending on like what they're going into. But what's interesting is the commander is always kind of in the middle of everything. They're not leading the pack. They're not behind the pack, but they're in the middle because they get to see everything. But he always talked about how at some point you have what's called the fog of war, where you are just in the mess, you are in the suck, and you're not thinking strategically. And it's like, what you need to do is pause, take a step away. And that was a big eye-opening thing. I was like, there's so many times where I'm just like, I'm in the business and I'm in the business. I need to step out of the business to look at the business. And what are the things that need to be addressed? And so that was a big eye-opening moment for me when I started doing that.
It really is a different way of thinking, and having that self-awareness when you're in it, as you said, the fog of war, the fog of business is a powerful thing.
Yeah, the fog of business. I think I read it. I don't know if it was a Harvard business study, but I think it was like a majority of like the amount of percentage that CEOs, Fortune 500 CEOs spend on strategic planning in their day. I think it was close to like 60% of their time is devoted to strategic planning. And they're thinking about things 3-5 years from now. They're not thinking about, hey, what's going to happen over the next 3 days. It's interesting.
Well,
and I was like, if it's good for CEOs, we should probably be doing this too.
And it's one of those things where it's like, things won't be, I'll wait for it to be good, then I'll start doing it. It's the other way around, as counterintuitive as that may seem. And if I was going to liken this to advisors that are thinking about, maybe they're a few years in, they just really got their feet underneath them. Maybe they're looking to get a first assistant, or they're further on and now they're looking to have another assistant, but they're going to call them a COO. Yeah. Maybe even a CEO that they're bringing into their business. It's going to be that situation first, right? It's going to be, okay, well, think about it this way around. Right now, because they might be thinking, man, like it's a good idea to add this person, but it's a good investment of time and money. But think about it right now, those things that you can get, sometimes the owners will go and backfill some of those things, even if they're high level tasks, someone else could be doing them. They're never going to get backfilled themselves, right? And so think about the opportunity cost of that. So I just had someone today talk about getting another assistant. It's like, oh, should I get this assistant part-time or full-time? And how should I think about it? It's like, well, think about what it's going to mean for your opportunities if you can have this person coming in and buy back some of your time. What could you reinvest that? Because it's easy to see the actual costs, the hard costs, but miss that opportunity cost sometimes on the back end. So powerful frame.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, like every time we have a problem within our business, I'm always thinking now, who, not how. Who can facilitate, who can help us out with this problem? Not how do I figure out how to deal with this problem? Because it's not this problem may not be my expertise. And I'm not going to, and I'm also the type that, unfortunately, it's good and bad, is that if I don't understand something, I still want to understand it. So I will go down a rabbit hole for like 2 days and then I'll become the expert in that thing. But it didn't help us at all. Like it was a waste of time. So I'd rather find that who instead of me trying to figure it out.
Yeah. And even if you do go down that place, having a who in your business to pull you out there so you don't get stuck down there. Hold on to your feet while you go down there, right?
Exactly.
I want to switch gears for a second, if I may, because I find this is always a really interesting topic for advisors. Now you've got the firm, now you're thinking about it you're acting mostly as a leader, focusing marketing stuff. Talk to me about referrals or introductions, as I like to call them. How do you think about introductions and referrals as it pertains to business? What's your philosophy there?
I'm a big proponent on asking for introductions. One, I don't like the term referrals. I think the word referral is just not, it's a lot easier for me to say to you, Nick, hey, let me introduce you to this person versus let me refer you to someone. The other factor is typically when we are asking for introductions, it's usually at a point where they've been a planning client of ours for at least a year, where they're in our client service model where we're doing one of their reviews throughout the year, and we'll just ask some questions. And it's more about making sure that we're quantifying the value that we've brought to them, that they're happy with us, that we're open to their feedback. And so there's a couple ways that I've approached it. I've used the Bill Gates method over the years. I've even used a method by Carl Richards, which I thought was really helpful. And what I did was I looked at my top 10 clients, but it was a different mindset that I had to do with referrals. And this is what I've shared with all of our team. But Bill Gates' message is asking more directly, where Carl Richards is more about kind of putting your researcher cap on for a second and saying, all right, let's find our top 10 clients and let's look at those top 10 clients. Do we want to replicate those top 10 clients? I think the answer for majority of us is yes, we want to replicate those clients. Well, what's the best way to replicate those clients? Well, the best way to replicate those clients is go talk to those clients and ask them to be introduced to more clients just like them. And so I created an email that just simply said, hey, when can we get on for a quick Zoom or maybe go out for a cup of coffee? I've valued your business. We valued your business for quite some time. We've enjoyed working with you. I would love to ask you some questions around business development. And that's what I called it. It was business development. We're going about a way of how we're marketing our business. I'd love to get your feedback on it. And so took them through that process. There was usually a couple situations that happened from this. One, my goal was not to get a referral. It was just to get a good idea. Like if you were me, what would you do? How would you approach more clients like yourself? And 9 times out of 10, I usually got a referral, which was funny. It was not my goal. I was not trying to get a good referral. I was just trying to get a good idea. Like, how do I tap into this market of client? So second thing I would get in that conversation is I would actually get a good idea. Hey, why don't we go golf? I'm going to bring out 3 of my buddies that would be a good fit for you. And I think it'd be a good interaction. Third is I get a bad idea and you just politely say, oh, okay, I'll try that. And then you don't implement it. And then the fourth one, which really surprised me, was, hey, Jay, I didn't realize you were taking on new clients. I was like, you know what? That's on me. I wasn't clear enough with you, but if you see the value in the work that we do, what I would like you to think about is who are the people that you care about the most that would enjoy an experience like this? And that opened up a lot of doors.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. 'Cause I love the way that you flow through that whole thing, Jay. There's plenty of ways to go about it, but I like, just like you, I like introduction. It's relationship language. It's connection language. If you're going out there, I have a client and what he says about his clients is that I just want to love all my clients. And I just love that mentality because it's just going out there and giving that.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's a feedback conversation you're having. Hey, client, really appreciate you. Did you know you were my top 10?
Yeah.
Did you know I appreciate that much? Often they don't even know that.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, do you know that? And
Exactly.
what else can I do for you? Right? What do you love? And that becomes the same conversation as well. So I think that's lovely. So creating that email as well, setting it up, awesome. As we start to close things out a little bit here, I feel like there's lots more we can get to, but tell me, you've already mentioned 3 books. You already mentioned The Science of Scaling, Extreme Ownership, and Who Not How. Any other key books that you think are must reads?
Yeah. Simon Sinek's Start With Why, I think is a phenomenal book, especially from a leadership capacity as well. So I would say that's another good book. And then I would add in, because again, when you read Extreme Ownership, if you haven't read it, if you're like me, I hated the first 4 chapters because I realized that everything was my fault and I had no one to blame but myself. And I think Jocko and Leif realized that the term extreme ownership, people were taking it very literally. And what they realized, they needed to create a second book, which I thought was even better, which is called The Dichotomy of Leadership, which is the balance of extremes when you're a leader. And so great second book. I think I have more notes in that book than I did in Extreme Ownership.
Yeah, both great books. And they tie in their military stories so well, which makes it super entertaining as well. But conceptually, it's amazing. And it's about taking responsibility, right? I mean, it's like, let's have that self-awareness. So really fundamental. Thanks, Jay. I really appreciate it. Any parting words, anything you'd like to share? And where can people find more stuff about you? I know you have a podcast yourself that you mentioned earlier as well.
We do. We have a podcast called Behind the Frame where we interview business owners. We put them on the hot seat for about 30 minutes. And we wanted to find a podcast that was where it could be almost like a mentor for new entrepreneurs. Because again, most successful business owners always had some type of mentor in some capacity. And if we can share the knowledge of all the different industries that we're involved with, I think that would be great. You can find our team at www.framewealth.com. That's our website for our financial planning firm. And then the only thing I would say is if I look back and I always say, well, what kind of advice would I give to myself if I was younger now? And the biggest thing that I keep on coming back to is embrace failure. It's such a big part of the process. I look at everything that's happened to me in my life. I have failed at every single thing in my life, whether it's not making the varsity lacrosse team my sophomore year and this and that, and everything how much it put back into what I need to do from a mental standpoint to compete at a collegiate level, to be able to do all these things. And so there's plenty of times where I knew I was very frustrated in the moment, but as Jocko says, if you've ever heard the term good, something bad happens to you, you just got to kind of say good. There's going to be some good that comes out of it. It's either going to help you, it's going to give you some feedback on the things that you need to do. But that would be my biggest advice to anyone that's new in the business is don't be afraid to embrace failure. Embrace it, understand, but don't let it deter you from your goals. It's just, hey, what can I learn from this?
That's right. It's about staying in the game, isn't it? And it makes me think about the frame of like either we're going to go in towards something, either one or two things are going to happen. Either you give up because something helped you, like you said, oh, that barrier is too much, it's done, or you get your result. It's like whatever's going to happen first is that what you're going to get to, right? It's like you never give up, you keep going, right? Use those failures as learning points. That's beautiful. Right? Yeah. It's so great to have you on, Jay. I appreciate you sharing all that you have, and I'm sure that all you've given today will absolutely help a bunch of advisors go to that next level.
Absolutely, Nick. Thanks for having me.